Ooh, hello, hello. Oh, happy Monday. Happy Monday. All right. While we wait for a few to gather up, here are the meeting minutes. If you don't have access, please request it. The meeting minutes are a collaborative effort. We've got a few agenda items today and a whole backlog of other agenda items, I think. All right. Okay, we're 3 minutes after. I know Kush is joining us for sure. I think Naveen will be as well, at least. And so we'll give people a couple more minutes. Some housekeeping items while we get up and going, and that is that this is the Meshery Continuous Integration Working Group. So this is, we're focused on topics about build and release of the Meshery project. And this is, I think, our third call for the Meshery CI working groups. This is good. We're making some early progress. We'll start in about another minute, but just as we do, one item I would say is that I think is it Udit, Mr. Garav? This is
Yeah.
your hey you.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm Udit, the co-contributor in Litmus.
Oh,
So yeah,
oh,
so
great.
today we are planning to show the GitHub actions if the time is.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Good to have you. You're in good company with Karthik.
Yeah,
Raj.
me too. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Okay. Well, Udit, do you have access to the meeting minutes? Hopefully.
So I'm sorry, Dee?
Oh, you have access to the meeting minutes, right? I think you do.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, we are 5 after. So welcome everybody. Happy Monday. It's May the 11th. And this is our third CI working group meeting. I'll share the meeting minutes, but please jump into them and take notes as we go. If I can find the share button. And then actually there's a, since Kush isn't on, I was just talking to him. It makes me wonder if he isn't hanging on a different Google Meet. So I'll poke him real quick. But while I'm doing that, just a call for topics as we get up and going. So I think Udit, I think you were mentioning one. So feel free to pop them into the meeting minutes if you would. Okay, good. Well, I poked him. We'll see if he joins. All right. So about 4 topics today. The first of which is about efficiency of builds that are done, of CI jobs that are done. And right now we're using GitHub Actions, primarily for as part of our CI process. And so, boy, I think I'm still waking up here. So, as I bring this one up, this was submitted by a relatively new community member, Spring Boo, and I think he had corrected. I guess maybe this sort of indirectly came up. I think he had corrected some indentation issues, I think, with the YAML that we have that describes our workflows. And in that process, it, I think, became obvious to us that between the various jobs, if I'm using the right GitHub action, or not, I shouldn't say action, well, maybe action, GitHub workflow vernacular, I think within each job, it seemed like we were doing some repetitive tasks. And so the open question here was, is there more efficiency that we can bring to how we're running the workflows? Thinking aloud with all of you, maybe the question here is, or maybe the dilemma that we're trying the thing that we're trying to balance is being able to call a specific job when it's needed to be run and not call on a specific job when it doesn't necessarily make sense to run it. In some respects, within the project itself, we don't always need to run all of the jobs, depending upon what changes are included in a pull request. As we go to break down those individual jobs so that they can be called independently, it seems like part of breaking those down might introduce some repetitive tasks. When they are called, when they're all called, when they're all invoked, maybe some of those tasks only need to be invoked or could be invoked less than we do. So I think that's the open question here. Has anyone looked at this? Everyone know what the question that's being asked here is? I think it's efficiency of workflow and efficiency of individual jobs, maybe overall workflow and individual jobs. Competitiveness. We've got if you can't tell, we have one chicken here. It's a rooster, and he's feisty in the morning. So good morning. Repetitiveness of tasks in individual jobs. Okay. Does anyone have any comment? Anyone have any insight here?
Regarding the efficiency of the workflow, as I told in the last CI meeting, that since the GitHub actions are still not that mature, so the only task to streamline the number of jobs which are run in a PR is to observe the metadata of PR. So since we were discussing about release drafter and labeling of PR on that day, so I suggested that if we label PR according to their title, we can also decide that for which label, which CI workflow should be targeted. So the release process and Docker build and push process, which are for every PR now, can be removed from the cycle.
Right. Okay. Let me internalize that by trying to repeat part of this back. And that is, when we take a look at the main workflow that's defined for the project, it has some conditionals to only run certain jobs or certain actions when in the presence of specific environment variables. I think. Kush, did you also enhance this to only run certain jobs when code changes are made in specific areas?
No, I didn't do this because we need to label according to PR. I'll just share a link. GitHub provides an action. GitHub provides a way to observe the PR title or the PR metadata, and we can use an if condition for each and every workflow. And the if condition will check if the PR is having a certain title, then only it will go on and run the certain work action for this. And if the PR title does not matches with the conditional which we have specified in the if, so it will not run.
Okay. Do you expect that might be we might be able to extend that logic to labels as well?
Yes, we can extend it to labels.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think that reinforces part of the importance of labels that we were talking about recently. Okay, so I guess what to do here? Maybe is this still like is our ability to eliminate duplicative tasks for a given build? Do is this an open research item? Kush, it sounds like you're saying like, hey, a part of the potential solution here is to um, be consistent with our use of labels, be consistent with potentially our PR titles, and those can help streamline part of the workflow.
Yes.
That makes sense. Um, okay. This may be related, or maybe I'm conflating two things. There was, I think, part of why this discussion initially came up was like the use of cache. I think was like the example task. Sort of the fact that we're setting up this cache like each and every job. It strikes me that like for our Go based code, that whether we're doing a static check, an error check, of that check, like since I think if we've made Go related changes, it seems like I guess the nice part about having these individual checks broken out into their own, well, I guess I'm using the wrong word. Like they're all included, I think, in the same job. They're each, and then I don't know, like, I take it back. Yeah, each of these checks is their own job. A lint check, that's a job. An error check, that's a job. Okay. And it's nice when like lint passes, but there's an error check that fails, that as you're looking at the PR, you can see that the failure is in the error check portion, but not in the lint, like the lint check passed. So it's nice in that regard that these are broken out. But where that becomes less efficient maybe is the notion that we need to essentially repeat like this whole setup, this whole test, the whole job setup. It's really just this last portion about the actual check that's being run that's different. If we were to combine these checks, it seems like the negative aspect of doing that would be that you wouldn't necessarily know right away whether it was a lint or an error check that failed because they would be under the same job.
But
Is
we
that
can rather look on the dashboard and it will say us that which of the following test failed. Because if we consider the situation now when we are having each and every small check as a different workflow, like we consider static check and security check. If we see that a static check has been failed. So we go to the workflow section and we move the mouse over the static check, and we ultimately have to see which of the following tests has failed. So if we combine this small test like static, security, and vet into a single workflow, we can decrease the work. We can decrease the time of our execution of tests, and it won't be a big bother because right now we are having around 18. Yes, we have 18 tests.
Mhm. I guess so I guess that begs the question. Um, I was only able to call out maybe one negative aspect of combining the tests, and that just being that it's convenient to visually immediately see which check failed from this level. But Kush, to your point, the trade-off is that then you're having to like your overall build increases in the amount of time that it takes, how much time it takes to get that feedback. That if you've got a failure anyway, you're going to have to go in and look at the details of which particular aspect failed, whether that was the line for linting, or whether that would have been a different line for error check and a different line for like. So I guess the next question then is there any, is the benefit of reducing build time, does that benefit outweigh the convenience of seeing the individual checks broken out? I don't know that it does. I should say, I think that it does. I think that, like, off my hip, and this is what I'm trying to generate conversation around, is like, it seems like grouping these together into a single job and reducing the amount of build time might be the better way of going, particularly to the extent that if one of these failed and we considered that, well, that failure is critical and we will not, and a PR can't be accepted, it might make sense that it's called out separately so that a reviewer can easily see a required check failed, and so the PR shouldn't be accepted. Whereas if we group together each of the jobs, each of the checks that are acceptable to fail, if there are any, if all of those are grouped together, that might be the right balance. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. Right now, given that we've got a clean build like this, it might be the case that we would say, look, we really want all checks passing. Like we want to sustain that level of of quality in the code. And so grouping the security, the vet, the static, the error, and the lint checks all into one will get a lot of efficiency, and we wouldn't have let the PR merge anyway unless they were all passing. So there's no need to have individual jobs. Like, okay, so I think maybe what we'll do is I'm going to leave this as an open question. Just the lack of kind of conversation and perspective here makes me think, hey, maybe we just haven't had enough time to think through this. So I'll try to take some additional notes, but maybe we'll leave this open, let people kind of weigh in on this question. The question is, should we reduce the number of jobs, consolidate those checks into a single job? And with that, does anybody have comments on that before we kind of let it hang out for a week?
Lee, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can actually, Simon, I would say that's probably, you know what, in the future, just start talking. If somebody doesn't interrupt, then I mean, yeah.
Lee, I just ask that in particular case, that job contains, I'm working on the Azure DevOps pipeline in the last weekend. So that's have jobs, and either within the job they have task available. So there is a for one job have three tasks and one job has two tasks. So I can say that I have a build pipeline, I have built the code, compile that into it, run the linting tests, and now the testing involved. So each my one build job has three tasks associated with it. So I think we can break down the task a job into smaller task. So in the each smaller task there, and then we able to find out if one of those tasks earlier fails, doesn't allow that to continue the next steps. And also, if that task is passing, we can build the output of the next task of that passing test. So he doesn't have to rebuild the entire thing. So he have some uh, output parameter going on. So he check that, and then the next step, and that's process is going on and on. So that's how I do it in the Azure DevOps. But with GitHub, for GitHub Actions, I have to just learn how these things do it in the GitHub task.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So so we'll leave this as a kind of a research item for a little while until we sort of come back with a more hardened opinion. It may be that there's no change needed, and we've got the right, maybe we've optimized for the right trade-off as it is today, and maybe we haven't, or maybe that's something that changes over time. So, all right. Next one up was that there was an open PR some time ago for spell checking Golang.
I think we discussed about it in 3 weeks ago that we should have this PR in Meshery sandbox repo, and if it works fine over there, then we can make a PR into the Meshery repo.
And so if I recall, I think that got added over here, the spell check. Maybe the thing to do is Naveen on? Or maybe the thing to do is have someone present what that looks like and how a lot of our. Okay, maybe what I'll do is that we can comment on the open PR and ask for a kind of a recap and presentation of what that looked like, given that we've been running it in the sandbox for a while. Because I think our initial concern, if I recall, was a bunch of false positives. How many? Let me see. Okay. The next item is potential use of Cypress for UI testing. I suspect not everyone, like myself, is potentially familiar with Cypress. I think it's cypress.io. Kush, since you raised this PR, do you want to introduce the tool for people?
So we all know that Meshery doesn't have any tests. So we have been discussing about having tests for server, for Golang, unit test, integration test. So it is equally important to have UI tests for our UI. So I'll just share my screen. I think the screen is visible now.
It is.
So I opened this issue recently to add UI testing using Cypress. We have various UI framework. We have various JS frameworks to do front-end testing like Mocha.js, Selenium, Chai, and there are many. But there are problem with Mocha.js that it is quite powerless, and with Selenium it is quite heavy. So Cypress has been in the industry for quite a while, and it has around 16 to 17K GitHub stars, and it is also open source. It is quite developer friendly, and it provides around each and every UI action which we can think, like click, hover, scroll, or filling the form, and etc. So I have just initialized the Cypress testing. I have made our UI ready to accommodate Cypress test, and I have also written a simple test which is over here. So this test just check if Meshery's UI is loading or not. It will visit up the localhost 5000. Coming to the port, I have had to make the changes to the port because the Cypress occupies 3000 port. And if you would run Cypress test, the the development server will not fire up because the 3000 port was already occupied. You can also run the Cypress test on local. You have to just check out the PR, and you have to just do npm run siren. It has a quite handy UI, and also it creates a video of the test which it is performing, and you can see the video to see how the test will perform. So I'll just wait till the test finishes. That should not have happened. That's just because I have not installed the Cypress because I have to check a recent PR. So you can even check over the GitHub actions. I have integrated the Cypress into npm test command, which is currently Meshery UI lint check. Yes. Over here, you can see Cypress starts the server. The server has been started. Once the server is started, Cypress runs its test. So here are all the tests which have been passed, and it gives the result. Also, Cypress bundles the package. So if I have ran the check once, and if there is a recent PR which also includes the test, so Cypress will not install its image again. It will be taking up its image from the cache, and the location of the cache is over here: home runner cache Cypress and the address. So that's quite it. Once the community approves, we can merge the PR and then start writing tests for UI. Because as I have seen, if you will fire up the UI without running the Golang server, there are multiple pages which you can access, like the dashboard, the performance page, and the settings page, the preferences page. So this can be a good start to introduce testing in Meshery.
Feedback from folks?
Kush, I think
That looked pretty good.
Fair enough. Actually, both of you guys canceled each other out. I think, Karthik, you said it seems like it might work pretty well. It seems like this might be a decent choice. That's what I got.
Yeah, right.
And Simon, I missed what you said.
yes, I think go for it. I think that's a very good suggestion to have it. I think go for it.
Also, the Cypress abbreviations are quite easy. Like if you want to click, you can just use the dot click function. If you want to grab an element, you can use the classes of the element to specify the function. So if one goes around the documentation of Cypress, you will see they are quite easy, and any newcomer can write some tests with it. So it won't be a big task. It has a very simple learning curve. It's not quite steep.
Nice. Yeah, that in part answers maybe a question that I had around the writing of the tests. And I guess one of the questions I'd had was the fragility of the test, to the extent that there are changes in the UI. How fragile are the tests? Do we think? Does this help reinforce good practice? Something like ensuring that we're using a globally significant identifier on for our classes or as IDs on the HTML elements?
No, actually, I have been playing with it for some time. It's able to grab the material UI classes which we have been specifying. And coming to the fragility of the test, since we lack the testing of the server, and since in recent days we observed that result page was broken, the sort function was not working. So this kind of issues can be easily solved with Cypress, as we can mimic the click function, and the click function does not require server to be running. And since we are using Next.js for a UI, and Next.js is server side rendered, so if you will just run the UI and you won't fire up the server, you'll able to see that there are multiple pages which you can visit the UI, and you can even play with Meshery. There are some issues like you can't run the performance benchmark, or you can't authenticate your user, but there are still around many of the functions which are still available without the server being run up.
And so one thing, the Mocha is, I think, for unit tests, Mocha and Chai.
Mocha is for unit test, but it lacks integration test. Cypress supports unit test, integration test, as well as E2E test.
Yeah. So okay, great.
Also, the Next.js doesn't provide us with any default testing library, because if it was having, then we could have definitely gone with it. Also, React doesn't have any default test library like Ember.js provides us with Ember unit tests.
Right. I think I think of the answer to my question about the tests being fragile. I think you spoke to part of it, Kush. I think in general you were saying that having an end-to-end or an integration test capability, whatever that is, Cypress or other, would be really helpful and would capture a number of issues, even just locally, that you're able to test out various aspects of Meshery's functionality without necessarily running the server. But yeah, even running the server locally isn't much of an issue either, because you can do that as well. So I totally agree that, like, hey, it's a little bit nerve-wracking sometimes to merge a PR, because we don't have a robust set of end-to-end tests of various tests. I think the thing I was trying to get at about the test being fragile is that some of the tools will record your clicks to help you to help you build out the set of integration tests that you want to do. I think Selenium is an example of that, or maybe JMeter is, I forget. And while that's convenient for creating the test, it can become a challenge later on to sustain them, because I think in days of old, those tests, that recording, if you will, was done based on like location of the mouse on the screen and where to click, and it wasn't really based on like selection of class ID, or I'm sorry, of element ID or class name. Whereas this is, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, like, that's great. Do we have a sense of of whether or not this tool versus other ones makes it easier to sustain the tests over time, or makes them any less fragile than the next?
So the point you said about the location of the cursor and location of the buttons. So since the Cypress can also support the location the native way, but Cypress gives you a selector like I don't. It's get the dot get function. In the dot get function, you can specify the class name or the element ID, and it will return you the number all the array of elements which it found, and from this you can use dot get dot find this. You can use the dot find function, and in dot find you can specify what should be the html written over the button or the class which it has grabbed, and we can easily use the click function or the fill form function. So there are around 30 to 35 such selectors. I didn't go through all of them, but I went through the one which can be quite handy.
All right. Well, so far we've got a number of folks kind of giving an initial thumbs up. Anybody feel like this would be a misstep to try out Cypress and go forward?
Lee, I think it's a good step, but one thing we have to show that these websites are changes very fastly and very rapidly. So I think because I have done development in the past 2 3 years, so the challenge is here that we have to rely on the clicks button, mouse moves, and other button kind of items, and these are moved within the page drastically where they are going, and we are not sure the login button where it goes from the top or the bottom or the center, and how the website of. I think there's a challenge here too. It is one thing that we keep in mind that it doesn't impact the performance of our app. The page that we're loading in is necessarily the page that allows, and number two, that if we most of the time that's the front end pages, they rely on the server side rendering for the initial page to be downloaded and representable in a faster way. So I think quite a few challenges here, but I think one of the biggest challenge that's I face over the year, that's if we start introducing the unit testing of UI testing, and this increase the performance time and quite drastically, and then thinks we have to remove these kind of things. So I think it's a good step because we have to do some kind of a unit testing for that, but it's time to be investigated properly whether it is impacted the performance time of the app or not.
I've used Cypress in many of my other projects, and I've also used the native testing like Mocha and Selenium. I don't think there has been performance compromise with this, because since the library has been already installed in known modules, and whenever you deploy the app, you just use the libraries which you have specified or which you have defined in the header line of the React. Like you use required billboard.js, or if you import material UI. And since the Cypress is of testing, it won't come into picture unless and until you run the command npm run test. So I don't think there should be any performance compromises with this.
Good question. Great. The point that's asking here, the last, I'm working on the Angular app for quite some time. So this is a bundles. When we build the compile, they have a bundle file initially generated. So when we start introducing the testing there, that last time I doing for the Angular project. So when we starting the load the library and forgetting what's kind of that. So it's increased the bundle size of my app. So that's something again. If it doesn't do that, quite an impact on the performance. We could go for it, but I think we have to some kind of thinking or some strategies in front of us. So it's not going to be challenging the going forward.
And since the Lee wrote the point about including of Cypress in the release artifacts. Since we will be using testing for the CI actions, so we can have another option that we can install the Cypress and the GitHub action only. So we want to include the Cypress into our package.json or log.json. So it can be considered as an option, but it would make it difficult for users to test it on their local machine, because whenever they will do npm run test, there will be a huge error since they have not installed Cypress by default.
Yes, from my point, I think you should go for it, and that's great step. So moving forward, we have to take how to handle this kind of how to handle particularly testing in our project, particularly continuous integration kind of that. But I think in that time you should start exploring that, but there are advantages, and I think thumbs up. You could should go for it.
Is it good? So, my understanding that right, if we were to move forth with the proposed use of Cypress right now, is that the Cypress libraries would be included in the basically in the UI bundle that individual users, that their web agents download when they initialize a session with Meshery. And depending upon how large those are, how large.
Mm, if you will do npm install with Cypress specified in the package.json, the Cypress bundle is quite heavy. It is around 250 MB.
Yeah, but we can have npm install prod and npm install dev. So when we run the test, it's gonna be the npm install dev,
If that be an option.
and then so it in the final bundle, no development library should be included, like any library needed for tests, for instance. Or we can, yeah, there is only two options, like prod and test or prod and dev, from what I know. But
I
yeah,
have
you can have. You understand what I'm saying, Kush?
Yes, yes,
Or
I
am
got your point that we can have npm install dev. And coming to your point, I have already specified Cypress and dev dependencies. So if someone does npm install prod, he won't be getting Cypress dependency by default.
I guess so does that circumvent the potential slowness? Like to the extent that when a release is made, if Cypress libraries aren't included at all.
well, the build is gonna be slow and when it's gonna be run. I'm having the same as Sam problem with the Angular project, but not that much. But it's the same. It's taking time.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the running of the test, it's not like instantly.
Oh, I see.
In my case, it takes like 3 to 5 minutes, sometimes even. Never mind, but it's taking time.
Yeah. To me, it seems like of the various tasks that are exercised throughout the build process, that that one of those would be to build using Cypress, execute the tests that are defined. If those tests pass, do another build of the project without Cypress, and that artifact produced in that second build, that's the artifact that's released, such that Cypress isn't included at all in the released artifact. Am I thinking of that wrong? Because it's
Not sure how we have it right now, but Yeah, in a separate image container, run the test and so on, and if everything gets okay, from that one, take only the source code that you are needed.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think that's
But you need to rerun the npm installer, right, without the dependencies. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
yeah, and that's actually a good point. That like, hey, you know, as we get into further granular control over our builds, that it may be the when we go to do a release today, part of the workflow is either invoked based on the presence of a release tag. Um, and so, it would seem like the same kind of logic would be included here, that if a release tag is present, that we would go ahead with that second build that doesn't include any dev tools, and that those artifacts would be used, you know, in the publication of the release. So I guess as we go to Kush, does that feedback make sense? Is that something that?
Coming to the inclusion in release artifacts, the releases which we are making, we are only releasing the Meshery CTL command. So I don't think if we include the Cypress, like if we merge the PR and if we include the Cypress and dev dependencies and the package.json, it should make any effect into a release artifacts. Because the dependencies or the node modules which we have specified now are not currently packaged with the release artifacts. So whether it is of 250 MB or whether it is of 100 MB, it should not make any change into the size of the release artifacts which we are currently making. But then later, if we start labeling the Meshery server and if we start packaging UI also, then there we can have a discussion about how should we deal with this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, if we do merge this PR, it probably will affect the size of the Meshery releases, because while the only thing that we're doing a good job of versioning today is Meshery CTL and putting that artifact available for download on GitHub, the other artifacts, which are the Meshery server container image, which includes the UI, and the other individual adapter images, those get built and pushed to Docker Hub. And so, yeah, it seems like in that case.
Yes, it will affect. If it will affect the Docker image.
Okay.
You're right.
So all right. Well, I'm sensitive to the notion that we've only got 10 more minutes. I do want to make sure we get to Judith's discussion. I think we've got a little bit of, I think we're in general alignment and agreement about the notion that the testing is needed here. Cypress seems like it's the right choice, but that before we merge that in, we'll want to ensure that we're not, you know, bloating the size of those container images. And there might be some pre-work in other areas to do before we can facilitate that, right? Before it's either a release channel or it's or something that helps us separate a dev build from a quote unquote prod build, from a release. So
Lee, just as last and the final comments about that. I think the best practice here is to you have the unit testing, then integration that is end to end. If you have a website, 70% of the tasks you're accomplishing by unit testing, go for a unit testing. If 50% of the tasks are going to the unit testing and 50 integration, go for the tool that have both in it. And if you have 30% that at the fulfillment, the unit testing is 70% that end-to-end testing, then go for the tool that's have unit end-to-end and integration testing. I think if we have uh, the requirement to include it, go for it. If we have accomplished the task by just writing the unit test, then I think we should go for the tool that have unit tests, and that's for a lightweight. So I think in future we can talk more on that, but I think go for Kush can work on their sandbox environment and what the impact is. But I think the best practice is that if the accomplishment done on the unit testing, most of the tasks you have achieved using unit testing, go for the tool that have unit testing enabled in it. That's lightweight. That's particularly 250 or 260 KB of size. That's smooth.
Very good. Okay. UD, I think you're up. So.
Yeah. Hi everyone. So, can I share my screen?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So hopefully it's visible. Okay. So in this demo session, I will introduce you about the chaos action, chaos engineering using an action, GitHub Actions, and how we can use different chaos experiments on our application pod in our workflow. So this is one of the sample workflow YAML. So it's just on the push and pull request basis of a master branch, and we have created these are the steps we followed here. We have created a 3-node cluster in the first step, then creating one deployment application over which we will perform the chaos, and the third step is the litmus chaos will perform chaos experiment over here. So this is not official one. This will be the part of 1.4 right now. So, and these were the environment variables we'll be passing. So if we don't have already litmus installed, we need to install it first, and these are the application details we need to pass so that it can catch the application and perform the chaos over that. And then the name of the experiment is mandatory, the image which we'll be using. So if you want to change, like you want to modify some of the experiment itself, you can create your custom image and can use that. And these are the other environment variables which we'll be using for the chaos, like how many times still it will continue and what will be the intervals between the chaos. And then if you want to delete the litmus just after the chaos completion, then you can just keep it as a true. And then after I'm deleting the cluster, we can have a external cluster connected over here also. I'm just, for this demo, I'm just creating and deleting it in the same workflow. So okay, so this is the repo. I'm just going to push so that it will trigger the workflow. Yeah, okay. I just want to run a pod delete experiment. Over a Nginx application. I have mentioned the details of the application. Yeah. So the build has been started. So it will take some around 5 minutes to just create the cluster and the image, pushing the image and creating the cluster. Yeah. So till then, Karthik, do you want to add more on this?
He'll probably just fill the time between the cluster creation. Just have a couple of slides to share.
Okay.
I'll
Let me.
just go ahead and share my screen.
Sorry.
Okay, is my screen visible?
Not yet. Not for, here it comes.
Perfect. Yeah. Right.
There we go.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Udit. I think I think a lot of folks who are in this meeting have already attended the session that we had on Litmus earlier, a couple of weeks earlier. So don't want to really go into the specifics of Litmus as a chaos tool and how it facilitates E2E, etc. Just wanted to bring out an aspect which we did not discuss then. So we did have this discussion about how developers can write their tests and they can create their chaos experiments and how they can run it in their staging or production systems. But the paradigm is people are now shifting left and running chaos tests in CI as extended ATV. I think there was a very good discussion before this about the Cypress tool, and I also learned a lot about UI testing and all the considerations that are being made. So let's say you have some tests that you want to do on the cluster. I think they would classify as E2E tests, most probably. And chaos is one kind of extended E2E. So after you've created your tests, or let's say you want to reuse off-the-shelf experiments that are already available, you don't want to write all the wrapper logic to integrate that into your CI workflow, right? The environment creation, passing all the right variables, creating the monitoring logic, and then writing the logic to extract the results of the experiment and all that. Probably you might want to automate that or have some reusable artifact there as well. So this is basically one abstraction over the experiment CR itself. So you have your own actions or GitLab remote templates that you can readily include inside of your existing workflows. And at this point, we are asking the developers to write their own exit checks, but probably there can be a way to generate these action templates as well. The SDK that we're coming up with is going to be allowing you to create experiments, but maybe that can be extended to create these kind of actions as well. So what that can do is it can help you construct CI systems like this, where you have your integration or unit tests that are already performed, and let's say you want to do some E2E, then you can actually construct multiple chaos tests as part of one or multiple stages. These are all tests inside or chaos tests inside the OpenEBS pipelines. So you can see that all these are actually chaos jobs that are being run out of GitLab templates. So we just wanted to sort of simplify this. That's where we are trying to come up with the actions and the remote templates. For example, there is this PR that we submitted into the cross-cloud CI for core DNS tests. So you can see here that this involves creating a cluster, a kind cluster was created, and then you apply a lot of YAMLs. You apply the litmus infrastructure YAML, and then you apply the experiment prerequisites, and then you go ahead and add the chaos engine specific to core DNS, and then you also have some logic to find out whether your experiments are passed or failed, things like that. You might want to simplify all this, and that's where these actions are coming. So this is a sample repo. I think this is the one that Udit is actually demoing at this point. The cluster creation here is because we wanted to demo it. You might already have that as part of some requirement yourself. So you can just use the kubeconfig and propagate that to the chaos action. You could pass some variables, and these are all, this is alpha at this stage. We might actually go ahead and change it going forward and make it tighter. So you pass the experiment tunables, and this will help you run all the experiments that you need to run, and then you go ahead and clean up. So there is an equivalent for this in GitLab as well. There are some remote templates similar to these actions, which you can include like this, and then extend those templates in your jobs. So this is what we are attempting to do, and trying to create some actions which are specific to the projects that are there in the CNCF community. Right now, they're all very generic experiments. Let's say you just want to start off today, maybe some Meshery component can be installed and tried, or some chaos, you can reuse this. Going ahead, we can customize that to more specific actions. That's all I had. I think we can go back to this demo. I can take questions after that.
Yeah, thanks, Karthik. So the cluster creation has been completed, and our chaos experiment is now executing on the Nginx deployment which we have created. And here is the watch over the namespace of the pods. So right now we saw that the runner pod comes in, and it is going to create a pod delete experiment pod, which contains the logic of finding the target container and executing the chaos, whatever it is. So Yeah, so it will run like that, and then we have other chaos experiments as well, like show. We have other experiments can included in the action. So the experiment pod comes up. We can have a resource kill, like resource experiments like CPU hog, memory hog over nodes and pods. So mostly we will cover all the experiments what are in the litmus in the actions as well, and we can use that also to integrate with it. Yeah. So the main logic of the experiment, the killing of pod, is right now going on, and then after the cluster will get deleted from there.
Yeah, I think we can take some questions.
Yeah, guys, this is this is fantastic. Thank you for presenting this. This is highly relevant, pretty intriguing because we've been, I think, exploring the use of time and explore. I mean, like this working group, and obviously this is the third time meeting. It's a pretty young area for us. That's the right way of characterizing it. Like there are miles to go in terms of getting a good pipeline, and Meshery itself as a tool has any number of very significant dependencies to the extent that it's going to stand up a service mesh and then attempt to manipulate it and do a bunch of things to it. There's all kinds of potential for tests to fail or for things to go wrong, right? Because there's a lot of things that are changing beneath its feet. The service meshes that it's standing up, they're changing and doing their own things. And so there's a lot of work to be done here. This, in some respects, just consideration of Litmus Chaos as an end-to-end tool, even if it wasn't chaos as the experiment, if it was just, doing for your stereotypical end-to-end test is I think, Karthik, you were identifying part of the value, whether it was nasty chaos or just a regular non-chaotic test, is it
Right.
including all those scripts and all that logic, like in your main workflow, or like you want to compartmentalize some of this, you want to iterate and sort of version, if you will, in those individual end-to-end tests and what they look like. They can be complex about what you're going to assert and what's going to, what your conditions are. And then part of it,
Yes. Yeah, you want to go ahead? I can answer.
Part of those conditions are things like, is in fact chaos. It is like actually specific to Meshery and some service mesh issues. Is that like, I think it's both interesting, maybe clearly. I think we've been in the past discussing about Meshery's need to facilitate chaos on service meshes and see how workloads respond and help users understand that better, and that whole set of conversations. And this one is a bit more around like, how is Litmus Chaos useful to Meshery itself as Meshery's own tool.
Right.
Some of those use cases are in some respects one and the same, but they don't entirely overlap. But there's even some overlap between them. Because I think the more simple the end user facing tests are, maybe the more that those might overlap with CI tests that Meshery would do. Things like just simply provisioning the mesh, or in applying a certain config, is if you want to test to see if that config has been applied. That might be the same kind of chaos experiment that a user might want to run, is to remove part of that config or manipulate that very same config. And they might be able to see what happens. but it's essentially the same.
Yeah, I think from a workflow perspective, you're right. This can be used for things that are non-chaotic as well. So I just showed you the OpenABS.CI use case. So there are different stages there. The functional stage that I showed you are all non-chaotic tests. They're mostly provisioning stuff, mostly sanity kind of experiments, you can say. But they're also being executed as litmus jobs. So you could sort of extend this framework to do that as well. And that's something that we are also seeing. Having said that, there is definitely an overlap. The idea is sometimes what you do in your CI is what you may even hand out to your SREs to do on production sometimes. So there is an intersection there. There are some cases which you would like to see being done in a different environment.
Mhm.
But yes, this can be done. This can be used for in a non-chaotic context as well.
Yeah, interesting. Huh. Well, given the time, we should probably, curtail, stop the conversation. But I guess suffice to say, I'm
We
in.
can. Is it only with the GitLab, the CI, or also other CIs?
Yeah, so right now, I think we started out by creating some remote templates for GitLab. And then we've also created some actions now for I think all the existing experiments are covered for GitLab and GitHub. There are a few experiments remaining. There is a plan for other CIs as well. Maybe we're even looking to the community to sort of pitch in share their ideas. I think, yeah, Circle CI, Orbs, there are a few options that way which we can include. I think GitLab and GitHub by far were the most common use cases that we found. In fact, GitLab was first because we were using it in OpenABS. Sorry, Adina, please go ahead.
So Jenkins is not an option, or is not in the next.
Not yet. I think we do not have ready templates for Jenkins yet, but yeah, we can definitely go ahead and look into that.
And another question on the GitLab templates, I mean runners, yeah, on the GitLab CI. Are those also for other infrastructure or only for the OpenShift or Azure? Can they also be used on premises?
Yes, they can be used on any Kubernetes platform. I think Litmus can be run against any Kubernetes platform. The runners, so these are actually the wrappers or the jobs that will run as part of a GitLab runner. So a GitLab runner, if you're talking specifically about the GitLab execution model, they could be a Kubernetes runner or a Docker machine or a shell-based runner, which are executing these scripts. Eventually, the target machine is still expected to be a cluster. This is going to work on applications that are deployed into Kubernetes. But the infra running these scripts can still be anything. It could be Kubernetes or VMs or containers, as long as they have access to the target clusters.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks. I think there is also GitHub runners. There also exist on GitHub pages. There is some GitHub runners also, but we will need to have the hosts where these are running. Do we use GitHub runners right now, Lee?
I think I'm a slight ignoramus here, but my understanding is that they're pervasively used in the workflows that we invoke. That
Like behind.
Yeah, I could be. I thought that like whenever we're establishing as we're executing a job, when we take an action to like stand up a Ubuntu environment, and then about that. Hopefully you guys can hear me. When you go to like when we take an action, my understanding was that those actions were more or less being invoked as a runner, but I could be.
Yeah, I think GitHub is providing the infrastructure. I think they're called runners to actually run these scripts, but you'll have to probably ensure access to your cluster from these runners, which is where the kubeconfig as a secret and other things are coming in. But if you could run these kind clusters in the VM infrastructure that is provided by GitHub, I think that's one way of doing it. You do get a minimal VM kind of an environment with some resources where you could probably run a kind cluster. Maybe Minikube would still be heavy, but if you do have access or you have access to infrastructure outside, you could use these runners to actually spin up some infra in a dedicated environment, do your chaos there, and then run another runner to deprovision the infra that you created. So you could have everything run inside the runner, both the business logic as well as your infra, or you could choose to run only the scripts here and have your infra situated elsewhere.
Nice. This is great. I giggle a little bit because there's some interesting possibilities here. We should probably adjourn and see what we can hit next week. Karthik and Raj and Udit, if you guys are, I think that there's an openness and a willingness here. It might be that we should take some of what we've done with Kind and kind of stopped there and take a next step with a potential. It sounds like you guys, it might be that you are almost ready for a use case like Meshery to come and begin to test out your GitHub, like your beta GitHub action.
Yeah.
But that we could, or that we would work with you to provide some feedback and start.
Yeah, that's great.
And is that about right? Like you guys are on the tail end of being there, or are you ready to, like have us try it out now?
Yeah, so I think the GitHub actions are not really being used anywhere yet. So we are, you could say, in alpha. So whatever Udit has demoed just now is on some local repos that we are maintaining. We will be pushing this into Litmus and hopefully start seeing some adoption of it. GitLab remote templates have slightly more adoption because we're doing that in OpenEBS CI. I think GitHub actions are in principle very similar, just that it has maybe a slightly different operating model. But yes, I think we are in a state where we should be beta very soon.
Okay. Let us know when it's there, and more than that, I mean, even in advance of that, there's a sandbox repository that you guys could engage in and
okay,
do some tests on if you like. It might be that you guys would want to do a PR or do put it in there because, well, I guess to be frank, because as you can see, we're still trying to get our sea legs in terms of what we're doing with CI. So
yeah, I think the sandbox is a good place. I'm hearing generally in the meetings that it's a place to try out stuff. So maybe we can start off by submitting a PR there.
Okay. Nice. Well, literally, as we go to say the last sentence of the call, Lidor joins. So, Lidor, I'll catch you up on what we just spoke about. But But I'm thankful that Udit and Karthik and Raj are helping advance this.
Sure.
Fair enough. Okay, gentlemen. Talk to you in a week or less.
Thanks for the time, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, guys. Yeah. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.